All
But
right.
this is your show.
Have you thought about play sets or action vehicles?
We have talked about that also. We may go with some kind of Jim Cornette's standing in front of famous wrestlers' cars line, because all of my cars have been so unimpressive. But the people love the picture of me at Crockett's office standing in front of Magnum's Porsche. That was great. So maybe I should just go around and have different wrestlers' cars, and it could have the Jim Cornette host wrestlers' car playset.
See, I think if it's a bigger product, a bigger item, then we could sell it for a bigger price. I think we should go right to creepy vans. The various vans throughout wrestling in the 80s. Dennis Condrey's, Ric Flair and Blackjack Mulligan's. The fabulous ones.
Well, actually, but now here's the thing. This may be a little known trivia fact. It may be a little known trivial fact for most people. But the famous Fabulous Ones van was also the famous Dennis Condrey van.
Wow, very interesting. What a crossover.
Because every time we took a trip in that fucking van in Louisiana when it rained, we were cussing Stan Lane because he's the one that sold it to Dennis when we were all in Tennessee before we left. And Dennis thought, well, it'd be good to have a van on the road. And there's me and Buddy Landell and Bob Eaton and Carl Fergie trying to sleep on an overnight drive. It lined along the outer walls of the back of the van because the fucking vent on the top leaked in the rain. It would rain in the middle of the van. And we were stranded and broke down at least 3 times on the side of the road in that thing. So we didn't have nearly as much fun in it as Stan Lane had.
Who was the first wrestler, either as a fan or in the business, that you remember them just pulling up and you're like, holy cow, look at what this guy's driving. This is amazing.
Oh, God. Well, you know what? At first, until we started actually parking in the back at the Louisville Gardens, when I started, we got access because I was going in the back door. I was doing the photography. My mom was helping with the merchandise and everything. We always parked across the street and came in the front door. I know a bunch of the fans used to go around back and stand around in the alley, but my mom's like, we don't want to go around standing in the alley, right? So I didn't start seeing the cars that the guys were driving until, I started going in the back and parking in the same area. And then it was funny because I looked back on it at the time and I realized what was going on. But some of the big names that you'd read about in the magazines would come in some of the shittiest automobiles, while all of the guys that were based in Tennessee, Eddie Marlin, Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, Jerry Jarrett, Thomas Marlin, all the people that were in the office or figured in, they all had beautiful cars, a Lincoln or a Cadillac or whatever the fuck. And I realized later on is because the names that traveled territory to territory, they weren't in their home area and figured in and knew that, they weren't going to get their fucking notice. So they weren't part of the office. So they were getting fucking 300,000 miles out of these things that they would just take on the road and beat the shit out of. Whereas all the people I just mentioned that were either here for life or figured into the office or whatever, and all the trips are 200 miles into Tennessee territory, just one every day. They had these nice cars and et cetera. Anyway, they were also making a lot more money than the big stars when they came into Memphis.
Who had the fanciest car in Mid-South in 84?
Oh, God. Magnum back then, I think, still had a sports car of some description. See, once again, I didn't see most of the fucking baby faces driving because we avoided each other that much. I could tell Buddy Landell had it was a 2-door Cadillac, and it was white interior, and he loved that car, but it was a shits for being on the road because it was a 2-door and you have 2 big guys trying to get in the back seat, right? But he loved the car. But one day I get out of the back seat to, flip recline the front seat up, and I'm getting out of this one door. And as I'm trying to get out, the fucking trim, his gold trim on the back of the seat comes out with me. It hangs on a button or something. I tear the whole thing off the back of the seat. Buddy goes, "Oh my God, Jimmy, what the fuck?" And I look and it's fucking plastic. It's not some high polished metal gold trim. Right? It's fucking plastic. I said, "Buddy, it's plastic." He says, "That's my fucking Cadillac." I said, "Well, it's a plastic Cadillac. Look at it." I said, "What the fuck? This is 15 cents worth of material." It was like I had fucking, firebombed his car. But all the heels, and actually I think Magnum had a sports car then because they did a video with him or something. He might have borrowed it. In Mid-South, everybody, Watts had the Rolls Royce. We've told that story that he drove to the last Stampede in Tulsa when JR threw his body over the fucking hood of the Rolls Royce as I was running by because people were throwing the bottles in the cans. But everybody else had a hunk of shit car because those trips were ridiculous even by wrestling standards. And the roads in the state of Louisiana and a lot of them in Arkansas were fucking brutal. And so everybody pretty much, they had something big enough. And I was the outlier there because I had that fucking Datsun Maxima. It got like 40 miles a fucking gallon. And me and Bobby and Dennis were okay. The fourth person may have been a little bit of a stretch. But your car was getting beat up every day. I mean, and if you changed your oil every 5,000 miles, you were getting an oil change. Even if you rotated with your partner and or a friend, you were getting an oil change every 2 weeks. So it was just, it wasn't until I got to Crockett and the Carolinas and the guys were making stupid money and they were all buying those fancy cars. And then, the roads in the Carolinas back then were certainly better than Louisiana, but I didn't necessarily see the wisdom of spending that much money for a car you're going to put, a minimum of 50,000 miles a year on if you're sharing rides with other people. That's just, but it's your show.
Who had the fanciest car in Crockett that actually drove it to all the shows?
Well, again, that's not an applicable question because Magnum had that Porsche. He didn't drive it to goddamn. Well, he probably did drive it to Norfolk because that's where his family lived, his mom and dad. But he didn't drive it to Charleston, South Carolina most of the time. It was for shorter trips. That's why he was coming back from Greenville in that car. And I mean, all the other guys, they got, Flair had, what was it? That BMW. And that was a fucking rib. Because once again, I've always been cautious with a dollar, as they used to say. So the cars I had in my lifetime, by the time 1989 rolled around, I had a 73 Firebird, but I got it used. That was my first car. And some other guy had it new for his first car because, I mean, it was beat to shit. When you would hit a pothole, the air conditioning would go off. And then you'd have to find a pothole, fucking hit to turn it back on. And then I had that until I got into business. And I got that little Mercury LN7. It was great on gas mileage. And I had the should have been fatal wreck. One car wreck in the Holly Springs National Forest after I'd had it for 6 weeks, and that was totaled. And then I got the Datsun Maxima that I ended up having through the rest of Tennessee, Georgia, and all of Louisiana and into Dallas.
But hold on, you totaled a car in the park?
The Holly Springs National Forest, not the park. I wasn't driving through the park. I was in the... I was coming back from Tupelo, Mississippi. I first got into business. And the reason why I'd got that car is because I didn't really have credit to buy a car because a lot of the Cornette photography and ring announcing business was done in cash in safe and A, right? So Jerry Jarrett, who at the time had an interest in a car lot, he said, all right, I'll sign for you and I'm going to be employing you. So I got that car, and then I'm coming back from Tupelo, And I believe I may have told this story before when I said that was the night they didn't even have me on the pay sheet, so the mark they sold the town to wouldn't pay me.
That's right.
But I'm going through the Holly Springs National Forest on the way back to Memphis and hit the slick spot in the rain and into the ditch. That was the end of that car. And then, as I said, I had the Datsun. And then, finally, we go to Charlotte in 85. I'm making all that money. I'd been renting these cars when we would go to, we'd fly places, and they were big on the Hertz rental squad. At the time was it was a Thunderbird, but it was one of those turbos. They had turbo Cougars and turbo T-Birds, and they were cool cars and blah, blah, blah. $18,000. The most that I had spent for an automobile in my life at that point in time. But for what the fuck, right? So I got that, and I had that for 6 years under those conditions. I think it was ended up 200,000 miles or whatever, even when we'd started flying a lot with Crockett's plane and everything. And then I had the famous Ford Taurus that I drove and did angles with in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, including Bobby Fulton bashing the back window of it out with a lead pipe while me and Stan Lane and Tom Pritchard were in the front seat. And I got that in 1990 here in Louisville at a Ford place in Shelbyville for $12,000 cash. And I had that for 270-something thousand miles. And then that's the one that I ended up with in Connecticut when I got the Toyota Camry from a car dealership owned by Tony Rumble's cousin for like $13,000 brand new. And I had that all the way until we ended up fucking raffling that son of a bitch off at an OVW show in like the mid 2000s. And made like $300 on it because it had 300,000 miles on it, and no rear view mirror on one side. Rico Constantino had taken a stuntman bump in the parking lot just for fun and taken the mirror off, and I'd bashed it with that's the one. No, my Taurus. Yeah, my Taurus was the one that I bashed in Atlantic City with the ball bat when they fenced me in after they broke my window on Raw. But anyway, the point of where were we going with this? I've not had a lot of money and automobiles over the course of and Black Beauty, brand new Ford Expedition with everything on it. When I got it, I now have 297,000 miles on it.
You've never craved like a fancy car?
No. Why? I don't want to go anywhere.
Well,
I could take $50,000 for a sports car and put it in the fucking house. I'll be in the house a lot more than I'll be in the car.
Well, let's get some questions here on this show this week.
That's just plain sense, Matthew.